So this is a debate with Marquett and two white supremacists, and I want you to hear a part of the debate, and I'm going to show you how to think about this particular talking point that they have, because he didn't fully address it the way it should have been addressed, and that's a problem with mindset. Okay, people think that this Western society is a better society than the rest of the world, which is not true. This is actually a very low quality way of living, and this is why people are so depressed, and the mental health is on a way lower level on the West, even though they have a lot more money than in the so-called third world countries. Which another thing they don't speak about is that they create those third world countries. They create those third world countries by continuously extracting resources forcibly from those countries where the people are not able to benefit, but a few people on the top are able to benefit. This is spoken about by John Perkins. They're called economic hitmen. You have to understand that these things are done by design. Every talking point that they come with, everything points to them being the problem. So you have to take that into consideration. When you dig deep enough, you'll find out that they are the actual problem. See, they don't talk to people like me who actually know, the full spectrum of what's going on. See, certain people, Marquette, he's very eloquent, but when it comes to this perspective that I'm about to give, he wasn't able to give that perspective. So I'm thinking about maybe debating some of these people, right? These white supremacists, right, with their talking points about black people, and I'll show them that they have actually destroyed the planet Earth very easily. Okay, so let's go ahead and listen to a bit of this talking point that these guys have.
That question, or do I need to reread that one? Or
Yeah, no, it kind of cut out there for a second. That's a good question because colonization sort of stirs the pot and makes it a little bit more complicated. I mean, do you want to get into the topic of colonization?
not yet.
A little bit.
We'll like. Just say narrowly.
Okay.
The whites in South Africa and the blacks in South Africa.
Trade them out.
What would
I would say that the white people would be allowed to maintain control over the society because I think that they built a better society compared to the native South African blacks, sub-Saharans that were there previously. And I think that that would be to the benefit not just of the colonists, but of the other black people that also inhabit the country. I think it would be for the betterment of everybody.
That is complete BS. Okay? The society that they have built is not better in any way. Like I said, just take a look at the West. The mental health in the West is at an all-time low compared to the rest of the world. And it's not because there's less opportunity. All of the opportunity, for the most part, is in the West. Why? Because they have sucked all these other nations dry of their natural resources. This is also where you get the problem of immigration from. It's because those countries have been destroyed to the point where they flee those countries to come to America. It's very simple. Not just America, but the London, Canada, all these different places. Okay? Because their country has been destroyed with people that look like these two. Their people that they're saying made the world better, which is a complete lie because the quality of life that people were living before was on a higher level. They focused more on family. There was more of a community. When you notice with these European countries, they're very individualistic, which is not beneficial to human beings because human beings are social creatures. When you go into the depths of the errors in their ways, it runs deep and it leads to decay, okay, of the people, of the planet. You see, the planet is completely polluted. That's another thing. Those places, what happens when they build their infrastructures and things of that nature, they destroy the actual nature in that place. So it becomes what? A concrete jungle. When you wake up, like the projects, you wake up and you don't see trees and things like that, you just see concrete. that's negative. That's a negative trigger for the mind. You're supposed to wake up, you're supposed to be able to see greenery, flowers, gardens, and things of that nature. Okay? And you're not supposed to be running in a rat race consistently. Where if you don't work, if you take off a week of work or 2 weeks of work, you're in jeopardy of losing your home. That's not how life is supposed to be. And it's less like that the more you go to those so-called third world countries. It's more relaxed when it comes to that. That's why when people leave from America and they go to those countries, or they go to, or rather they come from those countries and they come to America or any of these so-called first world countries, they say, nah, it's not what it's hyped up to be. This is a very draining society. So don't let them tell you that they built a better society, because they did not. They just what they do is they over extract resources so they so that they can build up, what they want, these high buildings and different things like that, which is really unnecessary. It's not necessary at all. All you need is a community. All you need is structures to live in. All you lived in mud huts. Maybe they were happy in mud huts, which is a lie anyway, because there's been castles in Africa from the time of the Byzantine Empire. So they're liars in that aspect as well. But the point of the matter is, okay, let's say if people were living in a primitive state, they were happier in the state that they were in. It's really not primitive. It's really just it's traditional living. Okay. They weren't, their head wasn't stuck in a phone 24/7, getting dopamine hits from scrolls. See, you got to really go into the depths of what they're saying is a better society. And it's not a better society. It's a much worse society. I'm telling you, if you've ever been around the world, anyone you ask, the people around the world, they're in poor countries, they're poorer, but they are more happy. Okay? They have more fulfillment. And there's so many points that I could touch on that. It's like, that's what I'm saying. If I were to do a debate, I'd have a list of points ready, because there's so much points. Feminism, all these things that they have pushed forth that has been destructive to the society is what they bring to a society, which destroys the rapport between man and woman. It's imbalanced. You know. Anyways, let's go ahead and continue playing.
It's a bit of a controversial take, but that's my opinion.
It's not controversial if you're a white supremacist. So we got one here, folks. We got one here.
We can use words, but it's like, it's what it is,
No, I'm saying we got one. You're a white supremacist.
What does that mean?
A white supremacist would probably be better defined by a white supremacist. I think they'd probably be mad, like a black guy defining what we are. But I would say simply, a white supremacist is one who believes in the superiority of the white man.
Well, so because
this is a very simple thing.
Superior civilization, that means supreme.
Which is not true. This is not a superior civilization. See, this is what I'm saying. You have to take out the lies. You got to really just extract the lies from what they say, because it's not true. It's not. There's nothing superior about the society at all. The only thing is that they've mass produced technology. That's all it is. And by the way, they had certain technologies going back in the ancient world. They had a light bulb in Egypt. There's documentaries on that, but they did it in a different way, and not everyone had access to it. What they do is they mass produce these things so that they can profit, not because they're trying to help the world, but because they want to profit. Do you understand? This is why they have the technology to give everyone free energy. They will never do that. They have the technology to give everyone free fuel for their cars, things that make the car run on fuel without cost. But they will not do that. Why? Because they're all about profit. Okay? It has nothing to do with helping humanity like they try to paint it. That's just PR. And what is mass producing these things, overproducing things lead to? It leads to destruction. It leads to over extraction of resources. They don't care for the earth. They don't care for anything in the future. They're not even looking in the future. They're looking for what they can gain now. Okay? This is their mentality. They did not build a better society. This is not a better society that we live in, where you're living in a goddamn apartment building, okay? Next, where you can hear your neighbor having sex with his wife. That's not a better society, where you can't own a land. The average person cannot buy a house. Even the people who get into a house, they do not own the house. They're paying a mortgage, and they're passing that mortgage debt to their children more than likely. So it's all an illusion. See, I would have touched all those points. I wouldn't have been doing all this fluff shit, making jokes. I would have just touched all of these points.
No, it's really the fact that you're in a place called Africa, which is undoubtedly the land of the blacks. And in as much as that's the case, the most reasonable, obvious thing to do would probably be to just tell the whites to go back to a white country. So leave the blacks in the black country, put the whites back in the white country, and let everyone proceed. But if you're a white supremacist and you say, well, if you leave it to the blacks, they're going to mess it up. And really, it wouldn't matter if they did mess it up, because they're messing it up for themselves, right? So it really shouldn't matter. But if you say leave the whites there to rule over them, then I would say that's a white supremacist position. And currently,
the thing, their mindset is that no one can survive without them. We've been surviving. The whole humanity has been surviving thousands of years without you and your corrupt system. What are you talking about? See, this is that God complex that they have, which is completely, it's built off of lies. Okay? And you'll even notice later on when he mentions what went down in the Congo with King Leopold, they get uncomfortable when you bring out these truths that show who they truly are. They get uncomfortable. They start to squirm. Okay? But this is a fact. Okay? And look, this individual put Moors built Europe. That's a fact, right? Which were so-called black people. All right? All right. And also the Christians were black as well. The first Christians to build up Europe were black as well. So-called black. All right.
Now we're not in a debate. I say
we can call
fantastic.
We can call it white supremacy, but I also included in my answer the betterment of everybody. I mean, it's objectively true that the black people had a higher quality of life in the countries where the colonists came into.
That's not true, man. That's not true. Just because you got the internet, or you got which internet's everywhere now, but just because you have a cell phone, in you're in an apartment building, okay, and you have access to a convenience store, does not mean it's a better quality of life. That's a misconception. Okay? That's a misconception. They have people who, first of all, there was a time when people would have to do everything from scratch. They lived off of the land, they had to do everything from scratch, which there's benefits to doing things from scratch, knowing how to do things from scratch, going through the actual process of cooking from the beginning to end. There's benefits in that. One of the benefits is you know exactly what's in your food. You don't have all those goddamn preservatives like when you go to the goddamn supermarket to go buy your food, which is poisoning you. Oh, but they can go to a supermarket, but they're buying poison. You see what I'm saying? So you got to think of it. You have to have a more clear mind and look at it from a bird's eye view. Don't listen to what they're saying, because their whole thing is they give people convenience, which they're just low level white people. They're nobodies. They're just low level. Okay, they're in slavery like everyone else. But the point is this: is that they give you an illusion through convenience that you're living a better life. You're not. Okay, their plan is to also have you where you own nothing and you still have to be happy. But you're gonna have a lot of convenience. You're gonna have a lot of apps. You're gonna have a lot of this and that. Money's gonna come automatically off of your credit points, and it's gonna be a lot of that. But really, when you take a real look at it, you're gonna wake up and you're gonna be in a digital slavery where you're not able to own anything. You see, but they're going to paint it to you like, oh, this is a better way of living. It's not a better way of living. The way people were living before was better. The way the Native Americans were living were better. It was healthier for you. It was better for the earth. It was better for the wildlife. It was more balanced between rich and poor. It was more community. You gotta look deeper than what the hell they're talking about. And I gotta keep going. I gotta speak on this because there's so many points to touch.
So we can call
that's not objectively true.
Okay. And we can call it racial superiority.
No, that would not be objectively true. For example, you said blacks had a better quality of life in the places where the whites went in and colonized. Is that correct?
Overall, I would say overwhelmingly. Yeah.
Overwhelmingly. Okay. And how do you calculate
the mental health in America is shit amongst everybody, not just the blacks. It's complete garbage. Excuse me. I didn't even mean to curse. Goodness gracious. It's garbage amongst everybody, period. Okay. You just look at all these videos. The videos that get a lot of hits nowadays are videos about people speaking about how terrible society is. And that's people coming from where? The West. Depressed, unfulfilled. There's a point where material things do not fulfill you anymore. And their ideology and mindset is individualism and constant, how would you say it? Material gain. That's all. That's what their whole culture is based on. Material gain by any means. Like my big bro said, they don't have morals, they have morale.
Overwhelmingly.
Well, we can talk about Zimbabwe, for example.
How about we talk about Congo?
I don't know a lot about the Congo.
Well, how do you calculate it?
I can give you a couple examples.
How do you calculate it?
Well, I'll give you the most important example, which is the Congo. And if you're going to speak about this, especially overwhelmingly, you surely are going to want to be educated on it.
How are they?
And
I want you to look at how uncomfortable they get when he starts to speak about it. Because this is how they are. They get very uncomfortable when they're called out for their evils. So basically, their mindset is they want to do away with all their evils, hide that under the rug, sweep that under the rug, and just paint themselves as these, these saviors for the world. This is how they always wanted to go about things. Okay? Even their forefathers did the same thing. They always want to go about it as them being the saviors while they were destroying women and children and being completely unmerciful and unreasonable, painting themselves as heroes, right? Oh, they recently honored the men that, if you want to call them that did that committed the atrocities at Wounded Knee, and they recently called them heroes. Yeah. Okay.
Say this not to debate, but just merely to teach. So the Congo was colonized by King Leopold, the Belgians, and the atrocities that they committed there are horrible. Some would say it's the greatest genocide that has ever occurred in the human experience in terms of death toll. Others would say that without death toll is the most brutal because they'd amputate the limbs of children, boys and girls, to make sure that they could extract rubber. And when you have examples like this, or just the fact that
and they didn't feel sorry about it, just like these two, because they took pictures of it. They took pictures of the little girl with her hands cut off, with little girls with their hands cut off, and the parents is next to them, when they have no limbs. So that's extreme cruelty. All for what? For the extraction of resources, for material gain. Okay.
Circa the 1960s, many of the African nations.
You see how uncomfortable he's getting? Let's pull this back a bit.
About this, especially overwhelmingly, you surely are going to want to be educated on it.
How are they?
And I say this not to debate, but just merely to teach. So the Congo was colonized by King Leopold, the Belgians, and the atrocities that they committed there are horrible. Some would say it's the greatest genocide that has ever occurred in the human experience in terms of death toll. Others would say that without death toll is the most brutal because they'd amputate the limbs of children, boys and girls, to make sure that they could extract rubber. And when you have examples like this, or just the fact that circa the 1960s, many of the African nations throughout the colonial powers, many of them by war. You mentioned Rhodesia, you call it Zimbabwe, at the time it was Rhodesia. So that would only indicate that the natives were not happy with white rule, or else they would have just left things as they are. So that point is very poor. And that's why I don't debate, because it's,
okay. I mean,
that's why I'm just interviewing you. I don't debate. I just interview you because it's too easy. You gotta give a
rebuttal to that, at least, because we can use one example, but there's a plethora of other examples.
Well, I just used two. I used the one that I spoke of first, which is the most important one, because if you look at landmass, the Congo is enormous.
Okay.
And then you referenced Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, and so I referenced the same one that you referenced. And further, it's consistent throughout the entire continent.
Sure,
but again, I'm not debating, because I find debates to be too easy. I want
to give you an answer to the question, though. So you gave two examples. I'll give two examples. So in Zimbabwe, they implemented land-based reparations. They got rid of
these devils. I mean, anyways, read this comment. Let's look at this. I want to see his comment. It says South Africa was a barren, dry, uninhabited land. Whites didn't see any blacks till after 100 years of arriving. Do you believe that garbage? Do you believe that garbage? They came to South Africa. They didn't see nobody for 100 years. Do you believe that BS? See, they have no problem just spewing lies as long as it fits their narrative. Complete madness. Complete madness.
I'll give two examples. So in Zimbabwe, they implemented land-based reparations. They got rid of the white farmers. And after the black people assumed the roles of the white farmers, the average Zimbabwean citizen went into a caloric deficit. The second example I would give is
let's finish the first example before you go on. Because is the second one in Rhodesia as well?
See, you are debating. You are debating.
No, hold on.
You're saying we're not debating. You are debating.
I want it to be noted for the audience that I reached out to one of them. And the reason I reached out to one of them is because I was already on his profile. I wasn't in any particular.
Okay, let's go, man.
And what they show is that within a month of the British colonizers leaving Kenya in 1966, the country falls into complete disaster. Within approximately a month, the native black people commit an atrocity against the Arab people. And there's actual real live helicopter footage where they're marching these people out.
So y'all don't commit atrocities? So white people weren't committing atrocities? He just mentioned the Congo. So what's your point? Okay, let's say there was a atrocity, which you got to go into the details of that, because a lot of these so-called atrocities that happen, people like them are behind it. Their intelligence agencies are behind it. Al-Qaeda. Okay? This is what they do. They set up a problem, they get the reaction, then they come with the solution. They do this constantly all around the world. Well, that's what the economic hitman is about. It's about destabilizing a country. They do that constantly. So they can point and say, see, look at this. You got to understand these tactics. And listen, just like the thing that's going on with Nigeria right now, I already know that's nothing more than a distraction for what they're doing out there to those people. And I'm not going to I'm not going to get too in detail what I'm talking about because you speak about those people and you get flagged. Okay, but he makes a response to that. All right. So everything that they bring up, all you have to do is look into it, and you'll find out. Okay, but let's say if that's the truth, right? Let's say if there was an atrocity, the atrocities happen every day. B, no one has committed more atrocities than y'all around the planet Earth. No one has created more death and destruction than y'all around the planet Earth. So what's your point?
To the beaches and killing them. Within a month, they completely disrupt the ecosystem. They killed like 12,000 baby elephants. There's footage of chopped off limbs. It's very disturbing. So in my mind, it's not a matter of racial superiority. It's just looking
so with Kenya, the Kenya example, it seems unrelated to the core argument. Your core argument is that the blacks were better off under white rule.
So the question was about South Africa originally.
Yeah, the question was originally about South Africa, and then you had essentially stated that the blacks are better off under white rule. I said that, yes, that's white supremacy, and I didn't say that to like insult anyone. I just said that in terms that's a fundamental driving belief of that kind of thinking, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to debate that. And then one of you took issue with it. It seemed like it was more so forced at white supremacy, and And so
well, it's
then
not that I take issue with it, because I'll allow that brand. It's
sure,
fine.
but
I don't
let me just give a note. So the Kenya example is very flimsy because it didn't address. One second, the Kenya example is very flimsy because it didn't address like the core argumentative piece, which is that the blacks are better off under the whites. You mentioned the first example of Rhodesia, now known as Zimbabwe, and you mentioned that the caloric intake dove after the white farmers left, and there are reasonable arguments to make.
The caloric intake, though. So they're calculating caloric intake. These guys, there's some these really sadistic people, man. So what? Do you know the people in Japan? The reason they're so skinny is because they naturally eat less. They have a lower caloric intake. They eat very small portions, which is really people around the West can heavily benefit from that. They eat too much. Okay, there's too much overindulgence in food in the West. So what's your point? They calculate, oh, went down by 200. See, we should have stayed. Well, see, we're supposed to rule over you. Oh my goodness, it went down by 300 calories. Oh my goodness, calculating the calories and shit. They can't stay in their own business, man.
Actually was not one of the better ones. The best argument to make in favor of why the whites should have stayed would be that
they did great.
They were commercial farmers and they had the experience and they had the time invested in being good at that. Just like if you take professionals out of any situation.
You're right. Africa's doing great.
Now you're interrupting. You don't have to interrupt. You don't have to interrupt. You don't have,
like he said, right? Because they had farmers there that were there for X amount of generations or whatever the case may be. And it's the same thing with South Africa, right? Like you take the farmers that have been there for generations, they know everything about farming, and you put these people who has not learned about farming and put them in that place, they're going to have a hard time. So there's a lot of nuance to the things that they say. That's why you got to dig deep into what they're talking about. That's a very good point Marquett made.
Have to interrupt. Like interrupting is not necessary. We're having a civil conversation. You don't have to interrupt. I notice people only do that when they have a problem with the truth getting out.
Yep.
I've not said anything foul. I'm just responding with facts. Now, with regards to the Zimbabwe situation, one thing you didn't mention, because you mentioned caloric intake, most of these countries are organized with trade. And generally, you're going to trade with developed countries. You're going to trade with countries that are free. You're going to trade where there's pre-existing lines of trade. One of the big issues that occurred once the British were taken out of power in Rhodesia is that they had enormous sanctions put onto Zimbabwe.
That's what
those sanctions are what crashed the economy. In addition to what you mentioned, which is the exit of the white farmers. I think that was poorly undertaken. However, it was the most genius thing in the world because there's only one way.
See, they don't go into those details about how they destroy these nations, right? Through the sanctions. And they did the same thing to Venezuela, by the way. Right? They don't go into how they destroy these nations, and then they go and point the finger and say, look at this nation. You got to really be, you really have to study exactly what they do. You can't be lazy. You got to really go into how they operate because they do the same thing. It's the same game. Okay? Even this thing in Nigeria, it's the same game. I guarantee you. That little group, whatever, that was a group that was funded. Okay? So that now they can point the finger and, they could do what they want to do with the media. It's the same game over and over and over again. These are the villains. They're not the good guys. Don't listen to what they say. They're not the good guys. These are the villains. I just want to touch on that. I mean, this is a 2.5 hour live stream. If you want to see it, go to the channel and watch it. But I want to touch on that. All right. And the point of the matter is, when you really dig deep, you're able to dismantle all of their lies. Okay, so with that, I'm out.